In finance, Jensen's alpha is the difference between the actual return of a portfolio and the expected return as calculated by CAPM, the capital asset pricing model. Now, typically when we talk about Jensen's alpha, a lot of people just drop the Jensens and we say alpha. So alpha is the difference between what our portfolio returns and what we expected it to return. And here's the formula we can use to calculate alpha. We say that the alpha of a portfolio is equal to the actual portfolio return minus this quantity right here, which is the expected return as calculated by CAPM. So this expected return right here is found by taking the risk-free rate of return. So that would be something like a 3-month US Treasury bill. So it's something that has zero risk associated with it, plus the beta of the portfolio. So that's the volatility of the portfolio relative to the market. And we multiply that by the market return, so the actual returns of the market, which is usually measured by something like the S&P 500, minus the risk-free rate of return. So really, all this formula is doing is it's taking the actual return right here, and we're subtracting this whole quantity is the expected return. So alpha is just the difference between the actual return and the expected return. Now, if this value for alpha turns out to be positive, so if it's greater than 0, then a lot of times you'll hear a portfolio manager say they have generated alpha or they've created alpha. In other words, their portfolio has outperformed the expected returns as calculated by CAPM. So let's take a look at an example of how to calculate this. This says calculate Jensen's alpha for a portfolio with the following data: a 12% actual portfolio return, a 4% risk-free rate of return, so that's what we would get if we invested in a risk-free investment, a portfolio beta of 1.5, and a market return of 9%. So to calculate Jensen's alpha, we would say alpha of this portfolio is equal to the actual portfolio return, so 12%, or as a decimal that would be 0.12, minus we have the risk-free rate of return, which is 4%, so 0.04, plus the beta of the portfolio, which is 1.5, multiplied by the market return, so 9%, as a decimal that's 0.09, minus the risk-free rate of return, so 0.04. So if we simplify this a little bit, here's what we get. So we end up with 0.005, or as a percentage, we could move the decimal place twice to the right and write this as 0.5%. So our Jensen's alpha for this portfolio is 0.5%. Now all that means is, if we look at our formula, the actual return was 12%. The CAPM model, which was this whole quantity right here, predicted that the portfolio would return 11.5%. So the difference between the actual return and the expected return as calculated by CAPM was 0.5%. So because this value is greater than 0, that means that the portfolio manager has, quote, achieved alpha, which means they have outperformed what the expected portfolio return was. Now, if this number happened to be less than 0, then that would mean that they underperformed the expected returns. So the greater that this value is, the more that the portfolio has outperformed what the expected returns were. So that was just a quick example of how to calculate Jensen's alpha.